Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Friday of April. I'm Stephen Ridgway. There is a maximum severity vulnerability in Commvault's Command Centre. It allows attackers to execute remote code. So the vulnerability could lead to a complete compromise of the Command Centre environment. According to the article, other installations on the same system, though, are not affected by this particular vulnerability. So it's tracked as CVE 2025-34028 and carries a CVSS score of 10.0, which basically means trivial to execute the exploit, complete compromise of system as a result. It's rooted in an endpoint called deploy-webpackage.do, which can be used to trigger a pre-authenticated server-side request forgery, SSRF, because there's no filtering as to what the hosts can be, which hosts can be communicated with. So there is a good write-up in Information Security Buzz, which explains in more detail how the exploit or how the vulnerability can be exploited. However, in the meantime, Commvault has said that the vulnerability impacts the 11.38 innovation release and has been resolved in 11.38.20 or 11.38.25. So if you are using Commvault's Command Centre, very strong recommendation to check the versions that you're on, apply patches as soon as is reasonably possible. Hasn't been a particularly exciting day for cyber news. However, there is one other article that I came across this morning that I think is very interesting. Microsoft's patch for Symlink vulnerability introduces a denial of service, or the risk of denial of service. So you may recall that in the last was it the last one, or it could have been the one before that, the last Patch Tuesday patches, the updates proactively created a C:\\inetpub directory if it didn't already exist. Now, the logic behind that was that so inetpub is the Microsoft's default route for things that get presented or published out when Windows is being used as a web server, or so it's I think the description is a default folder for Internet Information Services (IIS). Attackers have been seen to exploit misconfigured permissions to create symlinks via that directory and gain system level access. Okay, so the patch aims to address that. Now, the issue being, if you don't have an inetpub directory, the patches can't correct the permissions on the non-existent directory. So I think this is a curious approach that they've taken here. I'm not sure it's an approach I would have taken, but they're basically saying, Microsoft has basically said, well, if you don't have an inetpub directory, here, let's create one for you proactively and set the permissions correctly. I think there are all sorts of potential flaws with that as an approach. You can see why could see why that might be attractive, but there is now on many devices there's an INET pub directory that doesn't need to be there, with permissions that are correctly set, but they're correctly set for services which that device isn't supposed to be offering. So was it the right thing to do? Questionable, I think, quite questionable. However, security researchers have discovered that whilst the permissions may be correctly set on INET pub, the controls around creating symlinks or junctions. If you don't know the difference between a symlink or a junction, it is worth. I'm not going to go into that here because it is long-ish and a little bit confusing, and appears to be one of those arenas where Microsoft has had many attempts over the years at actually working out how to symbolically link one way or another. It's tied up with a lot of history. So symlinks and junctions are not quite the same. Previously, the way I thought about this was that a junction could transparently redirect or transparently link one folder to another folder on the same system. Symlinks could do that across networks, but symlinks could also create you a symbolic link to a file, so one file points to another file, or so on and so forth. There's also the question around what's a hard symlink versus what's a soft symlink, and the whole piece. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But using the MK-Link command prompt executable. Goodness me, my brain's working very slowly this morning. So using MK-Link /J, it's possible to link the C INET pub directory to, for example, something like a C Windows System 32 notepad.exe. That creates a junction from INET pub to a non-directory file. Once that's created, Windows updates cease to function. Okay, this I am absolutely certain that Microsoft will fix this in a future patch. However, at the moment, the impact is that doing that would permanently block updates. It's a very low barrier to exploit. All you need is some access to the device itself, and there's no official fix as of yet. So what Microsoft's saying as an interim step, as of today, the recommendations are to monitor and restrict user permissions to create symlinks in C:// to use endpoint detection tools to flag unauthorized junction points and to manually delete suspicious symlinks. So yeah, you can, I'm sure, write some detection tools for your via your endpoint protection suite that will flag up in your SIEM or your security visibility tooling when these sorts of things are being created. Relatively, in fact, a very simple detection rule to identify what's going on here. However, a lot of organizations won't do that quickly, or won't be in a position to be able to do that quickly. So there is a risk here that an attacker can freeze a system in time. That's kind of cool if you're an attacker and you happen to know of a vulnerability that you either suspect or know will be patched in the near future. You can use this exploit to prevent the fix to your favorite vulnerability from being implemented. So remarkably simple, highly effective tool that can be used as part of the attack chain very effectively in order to do things like maintain access to devices. The consequences of preventing a device from being patched well, you can imagine pretty much dozens of scenarios where that would be a really cool thing to do. So definitely would recommend that you keep, or one keeps, an eye on this particular story. Look out for patches in the future that may address this. Hopefully Microsoft will pick this up and do something about it quite quickly. And in the meantime, if you do have the ability to control the way that symlinks are being used on endpoints in your organization, get some detection rules around this particular vulnerability or this particular exploit, and put in place some technical controls, hopefully preventing this sort of dodgy symlink from being created in the first place. Right, that's all from me for this morning. I hope you've had a good week. Hope you have a good